The sun hung low over the dusty horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and amber. The wind whispered through the tall grasses that edged the village, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and distant campfires. From atop a ridge, a young woman watched silently, her dark eyes tracing the movements of riders far below. Her heart beat faster than the hooves against the hardened earth. Yet her face remained calm, like a still lake hiding a storm beneath. She was the daughter of the Apache chief, a warrior known for his fierce pride and unyielding command. Yet, even as she carried the weight of her people's expectations, her heart belonged to a man who should have been her enemy. She had grown up under the vast, open skies of the desert, where the earth seemed to stretch forever, and freedom was measured by the horizon. Her father's voice had always been a constant guide, strong and commanding, reminding her of duty, honor, the unbreakable bond to their tribe. A warrior's heart belongs first to their people, he had said. Yet the whispers of the wind seemed to speak a different language, one that pulled her toward something forbidden, dangerous, and thrilling. The man she loved was not like the Apache warriors who rode beside her father. He came from the very people her tribe had been taught to fear and resist. The settlers from the east were outsiders, their ways foreign, their intentions often unclear. Yet, when their paths first crossed near the canyon's edge, it was not the clash of nations that struck her, but the quiet strength in his gaze, the gentle certainty of his words. He was different, a man shaped by hardship and honor in his own way. And he had seen her not just the daughter of a chief, but the woman beneath the headdress and ceremonial beads. Their meetings had been brief at first. Shadows along the riverbank or behind the protective cover of mesquite trees. Words were few, but their meaning ran deep. Every glance, every accidental touch, sent a spark through her chest that no training or tribal law could extinguish. Each encounter was a risk, not just to her life, but to the fragile balance between their people. Yet she could not pull herself away, and neither could he. Their connection, as unexpected as a desert rain, was undeniable. The village itself was alive with tension. Rumors of raids and skirmishes traveled faster than the horses carrying them. Her father spoke often of vigilance, of protecting their land and people from outsiders who might strike without warning. She listened, her jaw tight, hiding the turmoil within. Each story of battle and betrayal made her chest ache with guilt. Yet she could not deny the loyalty she felt toward the man who had captured her heart. To her people, he was an enemy. To her, he was everything. That evening, the village gathered for the sun's descent, chanting prayers to the spirits of their ancestors. Smoke from burning sage curled into the sky, carrying their hopes for safety and strength. She joined the circle, her hands clasped, her mind racing. The sounds of drums and flutes echoed through the canyon walls, blending with the low hum of voices. She tried to focus on the rituals, on the words her father had taught her. But her thoughts kept drifting to the man who waited beyond the ridge. Unsure if he would return before the night swallowed the land whole, the first signs of danger appeared as shadows flickering along the edge of the clearing. Horses stirred uneasily, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. She felt it before she saw it, a tension in the air, a warning that something was amiss. The chief's hand rested on the hilt of his bow, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. "They come," he said, his voice low and steady, but beneath it lay the edge of a blade sharpened by years of experience. The villagers moved quietly, hands on weapons, feet brushing against the dry earth, readying themselves for whatever might come. Her heart pounded. But it was not fear for herself alone. It was the fear that she might lose the only person who had ever truly seen her. She thought of the man she had met in secret, of his face illuminated by firelight, of the quiet reassurance in his voice when he said he would protect her, no matter the cost. Could he face the wrath of a tribe that would see him as a threat? Could their love survive the storm that was gathering on the horizon? As the first figures appeared, silhouetted against the dying light, she held her breath. Riders approached swiftly, dust rising in their wake, their intentions hidden beneath the wide brim of hats and the shadows of the canyon. Among them, she searched desperately for the one face she hoped to see. But the closer they drew, the more uncertain she became. The tension in the village thickened. a palpable force pressing against her chest. She knew that once the confrontation began, nothing would ever be the same. Her father stepped forward, raising his hand to signal the defenders. "Stand your ground," he commanded, his voice carrying over the murmur of the village. She moved instinctively with the others, drawing her own bow, every muscle taut, every sense alert. The desert seemed to hold its breath, waiting, as if aware of the choices that were about to be made and the consequences that would follow in that moment. A figure broke from the group of riders, a man moving with quiet confidence, not charging with the others, but riding with purpose. Her heart leaped, and for a heartbeat the world narrowed to the space between them. The man who should have been her enemy rode closer, and she saw the determination etched into his features. He was risking everything, not knowing if he would be met with anger, suspicion, or worse. Yet there was no hesitation in his eyes, only the unwavering resolve to find her, to protect her, to bridge a divide that had been carved deep into the land by history and bloodshed. The chief's daughter lowered her bow slightly. Torn between loyalty to her people and the pull of her own heart, the riders slowed, and for a brief moment the desert seemed to pause with them. Every eye in the village was on the approaching man. Every breath was held. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of horses and leather, mingled with the faint trace of the river where she had last seen him, and then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the world seemed to tilt on the edge of a knife. The first shout rang out, a warning, a challenge, a prelude to chaos. Her heart raced, her hands trembling, but her eyes never left the man who had become her secret, her forbidden truth. The path forward was uncertain, fraught with danger and impossible choices. One moment could change everything, and the night that fell over the desert promised nothing but shadowed secrets and the possibility of heartbreak. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her heritage, the expectations of her father, and the force of the love she had tried to hide. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried, its call cutting through the tension like a knife. She knew that when the dust settled, when the echoes of horse hooves faded, nothing would be the same. The choice she made tonight would shape the lives of everyone around her, and perhaps even the fate of the land itself. And then, before the first arrow could fly, before a word could be spoken, she saw it, a movement too swift for anyone else, a shadow that promised that the night held more danger than she could have imagined. She realized with a jolt that this meeting, this moment, was only the beginning. The story of her heart, of loyalty and betrayal, of love and war, was just unfolding, and the desert had only begun to reveal its secrets. The sun disappeared completely, leaving a sky full of stars and a land cloaked in darkness. Her pulse echoed in her ears, mixing with the sounds of the village preparing for whatever was coming. And in the distance, the man she loved waited, his figure barely visible, yet his presence undeniable. The night stretched before them, endless and uncertain, and she knew that soon. Everything she had ever believed, in family, honor, love, would be tested beyond anything she could imagine. And there, on the ridge overlooking the village, with the wind tugging at her hair and the shadows growing longer, she realized the truth. Sometimes the heart chooses what the mind cannot, and the choices made in the quiet moments before dawn can echo through a lifetime. She was the Apache chief's daughter, bound by duty and blood, but her heart belonged to an enemy. The desert night pressed down like a heavy blanket, cool and quiet, yet alive with hidden movement. The villagers huddled near the fire, their faces half lit by flickering flames, eyes wide, hearts thumping in unison. The chief stood at the edge of the circle, watching the dark horizon, his fingers brushing the carved handle of his bow. The figure of the man she loved remained distant, barely more than a shadow against the moonlit earth, yet his presence seemed to fill the space between them all. The tension was thick, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Waiting for the first spark to ignite a storm that no one could control, she moved carefully along the ridge, feet steady despite the pounding of her heart. Every sense was alert, every sound sharpened in the quiet of the night. Memories of her childhood in the village pressed against her mind, the laughter of younger siblings, the hum of daily life, the stories her father told around the fire. Tales of ancestors who had fought and survived, who had loved and lost, shaped the rules she had grown up following. And yet in all those stories, there had been no mention of a heart choosing a forbidden path. No lesson in navigating the dangerous pull between loyalty and desire. Her thoughts drifted to the first time she had seen him. It was near the river, where the water ran clear over worn stones, and the reeds swayed with a rhythm that seemed almost like a warning. He had been alone, careful, yet there was a confidence in the way he moved. She had watched from the shadows, unsure whether to flee or stay, and in that instant their eyes had met. Something had passed between them, a spark she could not name, a connection that defied reason. From that moment, nothing had been simple. She remembered the first secret meeting, under the cover of a crescent moon. They had spoken little words, whispered with the weight of danger. Each exchange had been a test, each glance a confession. Yet even in those fleeting moments, she felt a sense of truth, a feeling that this man, despite being her people's enemy, saw her in a way no one else ever could. The desert night had been their witness, the stars their only audience, and the world beyond the river seemed to vanish when they were together. Her father's lessons came. Sharply now, the insistence on vigilance, on protecting the tribe at any cost. The stories of betrayal from outsiders who had claimed friendship only to bring destruction. She had believed every word, respected every warning, yet here she was, torn between loyalty and love. The man she loved was proof that the world was not always black and white, that honor and danger could coexist in unexpected ways. Behind her, she felt the stir of the village, a murmur of movement as the warriors checked weapons, adjusted blankets, and whispered cautious plans. Each face held a mixture of fear and determination. The Apache had lived through raids and hardships, had defended their land against countless threats. But tonight, the uncertainty was different. It was not only about who would fight or who would survive. It was about choices, about trust, about the invisible line between duty and the heart. The rider who had approached earlier was now closer, moving with careful precision. His horse was steady, muscles rippling beneath the saddle, as if the animal itself understood the tension of the night. He slowed as he reached the edge of the village, eyes scanning for signs of hostility, hands never straying far from his weapon. Yet there was no aggression in his posture, no attempt to dominate or intimidate. It was a patience born from knowing that any sudden move could trigger disaster, a calm shaped by experience and respect. Even in a place that might see him as a threat, she watched, torn between relief and fear. Every instinct told her to run to him, to close the distance, and leave the danger behind. But another part of her knew that the world she loved, the tribe, the people, her father, could never forgive such a step. The weight of history pressed on her shoulders. Generations had fought to survive, to defend their land, and here she was, caught in the middle, her heart threatening to undo all that had been built. The night deepened, and with it came the sounds of the desert, the distant howl of a coyote, the rustle of small creatures in the brush, the sigh of wind over sand and rock. Each sound carried meaning, each movement suggested the presence of eyes watching, waiting. The man's approach had drawn the attention of some of the younger warriors, their hands tightening on bows and knives. Whispers passed between them, questions that remained unanswered, suspicions that lingered in the air like smoke. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her, of women in the tribe whose love had defied expectation, who had walked dangerous paths and emerged changed. There was courage in those stories, yes, but also pain and loss. The lessons were clear. Love could be powerful, yet transformative, and yet like fire, it could consume everything if not carefully tended. She felt that fire now, flickering deep inside her chest. Threatening to spill into the open where it could not be contained, the man she loved finally stopped near the edge of the village clearing. Dismounting quietly, his horse kneeling beneath him, he moved with careful grace, each step deliberate, his eyes never leaving her silhouette on the ridge. She could see the tension in his jaw, the set of his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched. He was not just aware of danger. He was ready to face it, whatever it might bring. And for a fleeting moment, she felt a connection that stretched beyond fear, beyond history, beyond the divisions that had separated their peoples for generations. Her father remained distant but watchful, his gaze sharp, his presence a reminder that tradition and duty were not easily set aside. The other warriors formed a semicircle around the approaching figure, a wall of readiness and suspicion. Their whispers reached her ears, a mix of questions and commands. Yet none of them could see the silent exchange taking place between her and the man who had crossed enemy lines to find her. In that gaze, she felt both comfort and peril, a reminder that the night was filled with choices that could not be undone. Memories of her earlier life mingled with the present, lessons in hunting, tracking, and survival. Nights spent listening to the elders recount the history of their people, the sound of drums that told stories older than she could comprehend. And within all of it, the quiet moments with the man who had come into her life unexpectedly, like rain on dry earth, bringing both relief and danger in equal measure. She thought of the river, the one place where she had first allowed herself to hope, to imagine a world where loyalty to her people and love for him might somehow coexist. The memory of the water flowing over smooth stones, of sunlight catching the edges of his hair, of his voice calling her name softly, brought both warmth and fear. If her father discovered their bond, if the tribe suspected even a whisper of their secret, the consequences could be severe. Yet even in that knowledge, she could not turn away from what her heart demanded. The night pressed on, shadows lengthening, blending the village and the surrounding desert into a world where nothing was certain. Every step, every glance, every flicker of movement carried meaning. A silent conversation between the living and the land, between the past and the present, between duty and desire. The man remained near, patient yet alert, waiting for the moment to speak, to explain, to prove that his intentions were not those of a common enemy. And in that moment, the chief's daughter realized that the night had only just begun. The questions, the tension, the dangerous pull between loyalty and love, all stretched ahead of her like the endless desert. There was no easy path, no safe choice. Only the challenge of navigating a world shaped by history, honor, and the unpredictable turns of the heart. She felt the weight of it all, yet she also felt the spark of something stronger, something that might change the course of her life and the lives of those around her. Somewhere beyond the ridge, the desert waited, silent and patient, holding secrets that had yet to be revealed. The man she loved waited as well, a quiet force in the darkness, ready to face whatever came. And she, caught between tradition and desire, between the safety of the known and the risk of the unknown, took a breath and prepared for the next moment, knowing that when it came, everything would be tested: trust, courage, and the fragile promise of the heart. The wind rose again, tugging at her hair and clothes, carrying with it the scent of horses and dry earth. Somewhere in that vast, shadowed landscape, the first move would be made, the first choice confronted. In the night, deep and endless, held its secrets close, promising that the story of her heart, of loyalty, danger, and forbidden love, had only just begun. The night held the village in its grip, every shadow stretching longer, every whisper sharper than the last. The chief's daughter remained near the ridge, her eyes locked on the figure that had crossed the divide between worlds. The man moved with deliberate caution, scanning the clearing, noting every rustle of leaves, every glint of metal in the firelight. The warriors around him shifted uneasily, sensing the tension but unable to predict its cause. Each heartbeat in the village seemed louder, echoing through the stillness, drum of anticipation that carried the weight of unspoken danger. Inside the chief's lodge, the elders gathered in hushed council. Their faces were drawn and serious, voices low, carrying the authority of generations. One of the older men, his hair silver and eyes sharp, spoke of past raids and broken treaties, of settlers who had promised peace and brought fire instead. "They will take what we guard," he said, his voice trembling with warning. "And when they come, we must be ready." The chief nodded, his fingers brushing the edge of his bow, his eyes flicking toward the ridge where his daughter lingered. He knew the threat was not only outside the village, but also inside, threats born of desire, loyalty, and secrets that could fracture the strongest bonds. Outside, the man moved closer, his horse silent beneath him, muscles coiled like springs. He paused, his gaze meeting the daughter's for a brief instant. In that look, 1,000 words were exchanged, a confession unspoken, a promise that only they could understand. She felt the familiar tug of her heart, the pull that had brought them together despite the rules and history that sought to keep them apart. Yet fear pressed in from every side: the distrust of the village, the knowledge of her father's watchful eyes, and the ever-present danger of being caught. From another angle, the younger warriors whispered among themselves. They were not yet hardened by battle, still learning the ways of survival and strategy. Some of them suspected the stranger's intentions immediately, eyes narrowing as they watched his careful approach. Others hesitated, seeing in him something different from the usual raiders, a glimmer of courage and integrity that conflicted with the warnings they had been taught since childhood. Each whispered opinion carried tension, creating invisible threads of doubt and curiosity that wove through the village like the wind across the desert plains. Meanwhile, the chief's daughter recalled the first time she had ridden with her father into the desert, learning the paths that his people had walked for generations. The wind had carried lessons in silence, patience, and observation. "The land speaks," he had said, eyes scanning the horizon. "If you do not listen, you will be lost." She understood now that the lesson applied not just to the land, but to the people, the histories, and the choices that intertwined them. Every movement in the night, the shifting of shadows, the distant call of an animal, the subtle sounds of an approaching rider was a test, a reminder that awareness could be the difference between survival and disaster. The man dismounted and took a step closer to the village, careful to make no sudden moves. His eyes swept the perimeter, noting every defensive position, every hidden path, every figure that might challenge him. He had faced danger before, yes, but the stakes were higher tonight. Not only was his life at risk, but so was the fragile trust that had begun to form between him and the woman he could not leave behind. Each decision carried consequence, and yet he could not turn back. The pull of his heart, the knowledge of what might be lost, drove him forward despite the danger. At the same time, the chief's daughter felt the tug of conflicting loyalties. Her father's teachings pressed down on her like the weight of the desert sun, demanding duty and obedience. But her heart called out for something more, something forbidden. The tension inside her twisted, pulling her between worlds, between the safety of tradition and the risk of love. She glanced at the elders, at the warriors, and then back toward the man who had risked everything to reach her. Every glance carried unspoken questions. Every motion carried silent challenge. In the shadows beyond the village, other figures watched as well. Scouts and trackers, drawn from both sides, noted the unusual gathering. Rumors of a stranger moving through the land had already reached them. Stories exaggerated with fear and speculation. Some believed he was a spy, others a thief, and a few recognized the courage in his approach. Each perspective shaped the unfolding tension, layering uncertainty over what might otherwise have been a simple confrontation. The night was alive with possibilities, and the line between ally and enemy blurred with each passing moment. Back at the fire, the chief's daughter recalled her first secret meeting with him, hidden beneath the cover of twilight. They had spoken of hopes and fears, of dreams that could never fully exist in the open. The memory was vivid, the softness of his voice, the quiet understanding in his eyes, the way the world seemed to shrink until it was only the two of them. But tonight was not a memory. Tonight demanded action, and the stakes were far higher. Any misstep could ignite the violence that had been simmering just beneath the surface for generations. The man finally spoke, his voice low but clear, carrying across the clearing. "I mean no harm," he said, carefully choosing each word. "I have come for her to ensure she is safe. Nothing more." The words hung in the air, met with cautious silence. Some of the warriors shifted uneasily, others exchanged glances, unsure how to interpret his intentions. He did not demand trust. He did not force himself upon them. He only stated the truth as he saw it, leaving the decision to those who would judge him. From another corner, one of the younger warriors voiced the question that burned in every mind. How do we know he speaks truth? His words cut through the stillness, a reminder that suspicion was a necessary shield in the desert. The chief's daughter felt a shiver run down her spine. She understood the question well. How could anyone know the heart of a man who came from the enemy side? She knew his truth, and yet she also knew that proving it to others would be far more dangerous than crossing enemy lines. Her father finally stepped forward, moving to stand between the approaching figure and the village. His eyes were fixed on the man, calculating, assessing, measuring the risk. "Speak," he commanded, voice steady but edged with authority. "Tell me why you are here, and speak nothing but the truth. The lives of my people rest on your words." The chief's daughter watched, torn between relief and fear. She knew that one wrong word, one hesitation, could unravel everything, could ignite violence that would leave no survivors untouched. The man nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. He spoke carefully, recounting the journey that had brought him here, the dangers he had faced, and the truth of his intentions. He told of the respect he held for her people, for the land they had lived on for generations. He spoke of caution, of patience, of the need to navigate a world full of divided loyalties and hidden threats. And yet, despite the careful framing of his words, suspicion did not fully leave the warrior's eyes. The night seemed to stretch, the silence between statements almost unbearable. Meanwhile, the chief's daughter felt the weight of history pressing on her shoulders. She knew the stories of families torn apart by love that crossed the lines of conflict, of promises broken and blood spilled in the name of loyalty. She thought of her own place in the story, the daughter of a chief, tasked with upholding her people's honor, yet unable to deny the truth of her heart. Each choice carried risk, each glance carried danger. And yet she could not look away from the man who had come so far for her. The village remained alert, the circle of warriors shifting slightly, eyes scanning the surrounding desert. They could feel the tension like a living thing, stretching across the clearing, moving in the wind, in the sand, in the very air around them. The night was not quiet. It was waiting, holding secrets close, keeping its cards hidden until the first move forced them into the open. Every step, every breath, every motion carried weight. And every person in the village knew that the coming hours would test them in ways they could not yet see, and somewhere on the ridge above. The chief's daughter felt the full force of the night pressing down. She knew the dangers, the impossible choices, the lines that could not be crossed without consequence. Yet she also knew that the man before her represented a chance at a life that might not be safe. It might not be understood, but a life that felt true. The desert wind whispered through the grasses and over the rocks, carrying the scent of horse and fire, and with it, the promise that the night held more questions than answers. The first hints of movement beyond the village hinted at challenges still to come. Shadows flitted along the ridge, the faint sound of horses in the distance, a reminder that danger was never far. The chief's daughter felt the tension tighten in her chest, a knot of fear, longing, and hope that refused to untangle. The night stretched before them, full of possibility and peril, and every choice they would make in the coming hours would shape the story of their lives. The man remained calm, patient and resolute, waiting for the moment when words and action would intersect. The chief's daughter stood between worlds, between duty and desire. Caught in a storm she could neither fully understand nor control, and the desert, silent and vast, held its secrets close, promising that the night had only begun to test them. The story of forbidden love, loyalty, and danger was far from over, and the first chapter of their crossing paths would leave echoes that could not be ignored. The night had grown colder, the moon hanging high over the desert like a silent witness to the tension that gripped the village. The chief's daughter remained near the ridge, her eyes never leaving the man who had come into their world from across enemy lines. Shadows stretched long over the firelit village, flickering and twisting as if alive, reflecting the unease that pulsed in every heart. The air felt thick, loaded with anticipation, as though the land itself knew that the next hours would change everything. The man moved closer to the center of the village, his boots silent on the hard earth, every motion careful and measured. His eyes scanned the faces around him, noting suspicion, fear, and curiosity in equal measure. He did not flinch under the weight of their gazes. He did not show impatience. He knew that this was a moment that required more than courage. It required trust, patience, and an unshakable conviction in the truth he carried. And yet, despite his careful approach, he could sense the eyes of the younger warriors on him, questioning every step. Ready to strike at the first sign of deceit, the chief's daughter felt the knot of anxiety in her stomach tighten as she watched him. Her heart ached with longing and fear, a dangerous combination that had driven her to secrecy for so long. She thought of her father's words, the lessons that had guided her life, in the stories of ancestors who had faced impossible choices. And she knew, in a way that made her chest heavy, that tonight would be the test of all she had learned, of all she had believed, and of all she hoped for in her heart. Within the village, whispers had grown louder, though no one dared speak too loudly. Questions and suspicions passed between warriors, their eyes darting to the stranger, measuring his every gesture. "Is he telling the truth?" one muttered. "Or is this a trap?" asked another. The words carried the weight of generations, echoes of past raids, and battles fought over land, honor, and survival. Each whisper added to the tension, a growing storm that pressed against every listener, reminding them that danger was never far when the world was divided by loyalty and history. The chief finally stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "Speak again," he commanded, eyes fixed on the man who had crossed into their midst. "Tell us why you have come, and tell nothing but the truth. Our lives, our land, and our people are at stake." The man's eyes met his without hesitation. "I have come for her," he said simply. "Not for conflict, not for conquest. Only to ensure she is safe." The words were straightforward, yet their weight carried the full tension of the night. Some warriors relaxed slightly, others stiffened further, unable to reconcile the stranger's honesty with the possibility of danger lurking beneath. The chief's daughter felt a flicker of relief, quickly replaced by renewed anxiety. The truth of her feelings had been laid bare, yet the world around her remained volatile. Every whisper, every rustle of the brush, every distant sound of animal or human movement carried potential threat. She knew the night would not allow easy resolutions, that choices must be made carefully and with full awareness of the stakes. And yet the pull of the man before her, of the possibility of a life shaped not only by duty but by desire, made hesitation almost unbearable. In the shadows beyond the village, unknown figures moved quietly, their presence unnoticed by most. Scouts from neighboring tribes, wary settlers, or hidden enemies they watched, analyzing every movement, every word, every glance. Their intentions remained unclear, yet their presence added another layer of danger. A reminder that no place in the desert was truly safe. Every choice, every step, carried consequences that could ripple far beyond the village, beyond the ridge. Beyond even the known boundaries of conflict, the wind shifted suddenly. Carrying the faint scent of smoke and dust from distant fires, the chief's daughter tensed, sensing a movement in the desert beyond. A reminder that the world outside their village was unpredictable and relentless. She glanced at the man, noting the same recognition of danger in his eyes. They had faced obstacles together, yet this moment felt different. The tension was not only between their peoples, but within their hearts, within the delicate trust that had taken months to build. Every second stretched endlessly, a slow tightening of the air around them, a reminder that the night would soon demand choices that could not be undone. The younger warriors began to edge closer, forming a tighter circle around the stranger, hands brushing against weapons, eyes narrowed. The chief watched them carefully, noting their hesitation and curiosity, weighing his own next steps. He had always taught his daughter that honor demanded vigilance, that loyalty required sacrifice, yet he could not ignore the subtle truth in the stranger's gaze. Something about him defied easy judgment, and the chief knew that the night would reveal more than anyone anticipated. Suddenly, movement from the ridge drew attention. The chief's daughter realized the shadow had slipped closer to the village, unseen until now. Her breath caught, her instincts screaming caution, yet her heart longed to run toward the figure she loved. The man turned instantly, bow raised just slightly, ready to defend against threats he could barely identify. The tension spiked, stretching across the clearing like a drawn bowstring. Every heartbeat echoed through the night, a drumbeat of anticipation, fear, and unspoken longing. The chief's daughter lowered her bow slightly, unable to hide her anxiety. She knew the danger that lurked in every unseen movement, every half-glimpse of shadow in the moonlight. The desert had taught her patience and observation, yet no training could fully prepare a heart caught between desire and duty. She looked at the man, at the warriors, at the ridge beyond, and realized the full weight of the night pressing down. Every choice, every glance, every motion could set off a chain reaction that would change everything. The stranger stepped forward cautiously, his hands raised in a gesture of peace, yet every muscle tensed for action. He had faced danger before, yet the stakes tonight were higher than ever. Not only was he surrounded by those who could strike at him at any moment, but the woman he loved was at the center of a storm that had been building long before he arrived. He understood that a single misstep could destroy trust, ignite conflict, or even cost lives. Yet he also understood that retreat was not an option. The heart he sought to protect demanded courage beyond what the desert itself required. Whispers of dissent rose among the younger warriors, some voicing doubts, others daring to suggest swift action. "He cannot be trusted," one said under his breath. "We must act before he can harm us." The words carried weight, threatening to ignite conflict that could erupt in an instant. The chief's daughter's pulse quickened, knowing that the night could explode into violence with the slightest provocation. She realized that the tension was no longer only about the man or herself, it had spread into the hearts of the village, into the delicate balance between loyalty, fear, and the unknown. The wind shifted again, carrying with it the faint sounds of movement from the desert beyond. Figures emerged on the horizon, silhouetted against the pale moonlight, their intentions unclear. Some rode with caution, others with purpose, and every step brought more uncertainty. The chief's daughter tensed, recognizing that the approaching figures could either be allies or threats, friends or enemies. The night had become a web of possibilities, each strand pulling at the edges of her heart, her mind, and the fragile trust she had built with the stranger. She glanced at the man, who remained calm, alert, and unyielding. His gaze met hers, a silent acknowledgement of the storm closing in, of the impossible choices that awaited. The village, the desert, the unseen watchers all seemed suspended in a moment of anticipation, waiting for the first action that would break the fragile tension. Every sense was sharpened, every nerve alert, and yet there was an unspoken understanding that the coming hours would demand more than courage, they would demand truth, trust, and the willingness to face consequences that could change everything. The chief finally spoke, his voice cutting through the stillness like the edge of a blade. "Tonight will test all of us," he said, eyes moving from the stranger to the village, then back to the ridge above. "Every choice, every movement, will carry consequences. We cannot turn back. We cannot ignore what is coming." His words hung in the night, heavy and deliberate, and the chief's daughter felt the full weight of them pressing on her chest. She knew he was right. Nothing would be easy, nothing would be certain, and the night would demand more than anyone had yet given. As the figures in the distance drew closer, the younger warriors edged tighter around the stranger, their unease growing with every heartbeat. The chief's daughter's gaze swept across the clearing, noting the tension in every face, the fear in every whispered word, the anticipation in every motion. The desert seemed alive with potential chaos, waiting for the spark that would ignite it. And she knew that the spark could come from any direction from the ridge, from the approaching figures, from the hidden intentions in hearts both loyal and divided. And in that moment, standing between the ridge and the village, between duty and desire, she realized the truth she could not ignore. The night was no longer just a test, it was a turning point. Every choice, every glance, every breath would shape what came next. The man who had risked everything to reach her was waiting. Her father's eyes were unwavering. The younger warriors were ready. The unseen forces in the desert beyond had not yet revealed their hand. The story of loyalty, love, danger, and the impossible crossing of boundaries had reached the edge of the precipice, and the night held its secrets close, promising that the climax was near. And nothing would be the same when the first move was made. The first light of dawn had begun to touch the horizon, painting the desert in pale shades of pink and gold. But the village remained tense, every figure still poised in the aftermath of the night's uncertainty. The dust had begun to settle, though the echoes of what had almost erupted still hung in the air. The chief's daughter stepped down from the ridge, her heart pounding with the memory of moments that had felt as though the world might break apart at any second. She had faced fear, desire, and the weight of generations all at once. And now the village was quiet enough to hear the slow, deliberate beat of her own pulse. The man she had risked everything for stood nearby, his presence a steady anchor amidst the lingering tension. The night had tested him as it had tested her, had pressed the impossible choices upon his shoulders, yet he had remained calm and true. He had proven more than his words ever could, showing patience, courage, and a respect for the tribe that had slowly begun to chip away at suspicion. She looked at him, and the memory of every whispered word, every secret meeting, every fleeting glance, filled her chest with warmth and relief. Her father approached, moving with the same authority that had always defined him. The weight of his presence was immense, yet there was a shift in his eyes that the daughter had never seen before, something softer, though still careful, as if the events of the night had reshaped the rigid boundaries he had carried for so long. He spoke, his voice calm but deliberate. The night has tested more than just our vigilance. It has tested hearts, intentions, and courage. I have seen the truth in your actions. There was a pause, heavy with the unspoken acknowledgement that lives, traditions, and love had all been on the line. The younger warriors, still clustered nearby, exhaled as tension left their muscles. They had seen the man's determination, his respect for the village, and the undeniable connection he shared with the chief's daughter. Some of their skepticism remained, naturally, but it had been tempered by the courage displayed by the patience and honesty that no amount of suspicion could entirely erase. The desert had watched. The night had offered its silent judgment. Action and integrity mattered as much as loyalty to tradition. The chief's daughter moved closer to her father, taking a breath that seemed to release the last of the fear that had gripped her through the night. She had faced her own uncertainty, her hidden longing, and the dangerous intersection of love and duty. In the quiet morning, she finally felt the fragile weight of relief, though she knew the journey ahead would not be without its challenges. The desert had tested her. The night had tested them all. But she had learned something vital. Courage was measured not just in battle, but in the truth of the heart. The man stepped forward, his voice low and respectful as he addressed the chief. "I came with only the hope of keeping her safe," he said, "and I have seen that actions speak louder than words. I do not seek your permission to be here. I only seek understanding, and if possible, trust." The chief regarded him for a long moment, noting every gesture, every nuance, every subtle sign of honesty. And then, slowly he nodded, the motion deliberate but resolute. "Trust is not given lightly," he said, "but it can be earned. You have begun that process tonight." The village exhaled collectively, the tension slowly dissolving as the morning light strengthened. Conversations began again, cautious and respectful, blending relief with lingering curiosity. The chief's daughter moved among the villagers, greeting faces that had been anxious mere hours before, noting the unspoken acknowledgement of what had passed. Each person carried their own reflection of the night, the lessons it had delivered, and the courage they had witnessed in moments that might have seemed impossible to survive. In the hours that followed, the desert around the village felt lighter, as though the land itself had released the pressure of uncertainty. The wind carried scents of sage, dust, and distant river water, wrapping the village in a sense of calm that had been absent for so long. The man remained close to the chief's daughter, but with the respect and discretion that had defined him from the beginning. They walked together near the riverbank, where they had first met, each step a reminder of the paths they had taken and the danger they had endured to arrive at this moment. The chief observed quietly from the lodge, reflecting on the events of the night and what they meant for the future. He knew that the world beyond the village would never fully accept or understand the bond that had formed, that history and prejudice could not be erased in a single night. Yet he also recognized the courage it had taken, the integrity displayed, and the potential for connection that went beyond borders and conflict. In that quiet reflection, he began to see that honor was not only in defense of the land, but also in understanding, patience, and measured acceptance. The daughter and the man paused near the water, listening to the gentle flow over stones, letting the quiet of the morning settle into their bones. Words were not needed. The shared silence spoke volumes, testament to the trials they had endured and the fragile, powerful truth that had emerged. They knew that challenges still lay ahead, that suspicion and history could never be fully erased. But the night had proven one undeniable truth: hearts could bridge the widest divides if given courage, patience, and honesty back in the village. Smaller subplots found their own quiet resolutions. The younger warriors, once hesitant and suspicious, began to understand that courage and integrity were not bound by tribe or history. They had witnessed an outsider act with respect and bravery. It had reshaped the way they thought about loyalty, trust, and judgment. Some exchanged nods of understanding, others shared quiet whispers of admiration, each learning that the world was not as simple as enemies and allies, black and white, but a spectrum of intention and choice. The elders of the village gathered briefly, exchanging quiet words of reflection. They acknowledged the dangers of the night, the bravery of those involved, the delicate thread of trust that had been woven between the chief's daughter and the stranger. Their stories, long passed down, now carried a new chapter, one that would be remembered not only for the danger faced, but for the lessons learned about courage, love, and the strength of the human heart in navigating impossible choices. As the sun climbed higher, the chief called the village together in a circle once more. His voice carried the authority of a lifetime and the softness of understanding. "Tonight, we have seen danger, fear, courage, and truth," he said. "We have learned that the heart can guide us in ways the mind cannot always predict. We must honor our history, but we must also honor what is true and just." The villagers listened, nodding, absorbing the wisdom of a leader who had witnessed the power of courage, trust, and the unpredictable nature of human connection. The chief's daughter stood beside him, her hand brushing against the man's. The gesture was simple, quiet yet powerful, a symbol of what had survived the night and what could endure. Around them, the village felt the relief that comes with survival, the subtle understanding that the events of the past hours had changed them, even if only in small ways. There was still work to be done, trust to be built, and boundaries to navigate. But the most immediate danger had passed. Leaving behind lessons that would echo through time, they walked back toward the village together, the desert stretching endlessly around them. The wind carried the scent of sage and earth, the river flowed steadily, and the first signs of daily life began to return. Children laughed quietly in the distance, elders resumed their tasks, and the younger warriors moved with a lighter step, carrying the knowledge that courage, honesty, and patience could bridge the deepest divides. The chief watched them, noting the subtle transformation in the village and within his daughter. He realized that love, like loyalty and courage, could not be fully confined or controlled. It had to be acknowledged, respected, and guided. And in doing so, it had the power to teach, to heal, and to shape the future in ways no one could have anticipated. As the morning sun fully illuminated the village, the chief's daughter and the man paused once more near the river. Their eyes met, sharing a quiet understanding of the risks they had taken, the lessons learned, and the bond that had survived against impossible odds. The desert stretched on endlessly, a reminder of the vastness of the world, the dangers that lay beyond, and the possibilities that awaited those brave enough to trust the heart. The village settled into the rhythm of the day. The events of the night slowly becoming stories whispered to the wind, to the river, to those who would remember. And while the path ahead remained uncertain, the chief's daughter knew that she had faced the impossible, risked the forbidden, and discovered the truth of her own heart. Her love, her courage, and the choices made in the shadowed night had reshaped not only her life, but the village itself, leaving behind a quiet legacy of hope, trust, and the enduring power of human connection. The wind carried their laughter and conversation across the desert. The river glinted in the sunlight, and the horizon promised another day. Another chance to navigate the delicate balance of love, loyalty, and life in a world shaped by history, courage, and the heart. And in that quiet morning, with all the tension of the night finally easing, the chief's daughter understood that though danger would always exist, the truth of love and the strength of the human heart could endure, teaching lessons that would echo far beyond the desert, far beyond the tribe, and far beyond the boundaries of enemy and friend.